And then there's a lot of debate about, were these carved, or was this some kind of a high energy event that melted buildings and then they just reclaimed what they could. I haven't seen these sites with my own eyes, so I can't draw conclusions. But I think ultimately there's a fractal nature to our world and to our reality that ties into magnetics. It ties into fluid dynamics and the flow of toroids, of whether it's storm systems, whether it's the flow of blood through our heart. These things are scalable, they're reproducible, they can be reproduced in a laboratory, which is amazing. You don't have to rely on the high priests of scientism with their giant telescopes or supposed things floating in space to tell you the truth about the nature of reality. You can actually engage in experiments yourself.
Hey friends, welcome back. Thank you so very, very much for tuning in. It's Sean from SGT Report.tv and SGTReport.com here. Friends, are you ready for some woo? Hidden history woo? Me too. I want to welcome back to the show Mike Wilkerson. His YouTube channel is Stellium7. I last spoke with Mike about 15 months ago, and boy, has the world changed a lot since. We hadn't heard about COVID or lockdowns back then, and, well, y'all know the story. The New World Order, they don't want us healthy, happy, prosperous, and they certainly don't want us to know about the hidden history of the world. Today we're going to talk about new research coming from Mike. In my last interview with Mike, we talked about titans and heart stones. Well, what does the Bible say about giants? 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 4, and there came out from the camp of the Philistines a champion named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Some of you know about the Nephilim. Giants roamed the earth in those days. Could it be true? Mike Wilkerson joins us right now to expose the hidden history. Mike, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Thank you, Sean, for inviting me back. It's a pleasure.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you, and as fate would have it, I dragged my feet for years on starting a podcast version of SGT Report. That's up now. It's called The Corporate Propaganda Antidote, and you can find it on iTunes and Podbean. Spotify just took us down, but the point I want to make is that you, Mike, were my first podcast upload. After dragging my feet for too many years, let me put it that way. How have you been, Mike?
I've been as good as one can be, considering the world has gone into full Twilight Zone mode. So yeah, it's been an interesting little over a year since we talked. I live in Spain, as people who saw the last video know, and the lockdowns were very intense here. My business was shut down for 10 weeks, and we were locked in our homes, and the only place you could go was to the store, and you couldn't even be out on a trail hiking, and so I kept myself in shape by going up and down the stairs in our apartment building over and over again, and yeah, and the video that you and I did together was very well received, and I think my channel basically doubled overnight in size, and it was really nice because the people who came were very interested in the research and actually took the time to go through it, as opposed to what most of the critics have done, which is just wave their hands and dismiss it. That was January 19th when we did that video. And then March 10th, I got to experience the other side of the coin, because Simon Dan, one of the big science defenders, a first-rate troll, got wind of my channel. And so I think our interview had something like 100,000 views, and that was obviously before your whole platform and support and everything was yanked, as they yanked the First Amendment as well. And so when Simon Dan did this video, it was about a 12-minute video that was just pure mockery, and he didn't really take up any of the research at all. But nearly 200,000 people came to the channel, and they were just, filled with hatred and lots of ugly comments and making claims about what I had or hadn't done. And so that was an interesting experience. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And it was interesting to watch how he did it, because it was the typical approach that people who are mocking a lot of research take, which is just straw man arguments and appeals to authority, and just ignoring the main points that were being made. And he did all of those things. And at one point, he even paused the video and he showed a list of 40 coincidences that I had put in my first video. And he instead of going through them or talking about them, he just picked out one, said, "This is utterly ridiculous, and because it's so ridiculous, I'm just going to ignore the remainder." So, pretty much everyone who went to my channel after that stopped at the first video, which I was thankful for, because that video had been overwhelmingly liked, and then in the space of about a week, it had, I think, about 1,000 thumbs down. So that was an interesting experience.
Simon Dan and his troll army. Well, don't let that discourage you, my friend. It generally means you're over the target, and we know there's a hidden history to this world. Now, those that would deny the biblical truths in that most important book are free to do so. They're also free to take the vaccine. It's not really a vaccine. It's an experimental biological agent, and I'm sure Simon Dan supports it. I bet he would encourage his troll army to take the Pfizer Moderna jab. The point I want to make about Simon Dan, as I peruse his channel here while you're talking, is he seems to be very, very consumed with also trolling people who believe the Earth isn't exactly what we're told in terms of the heliocentric model. He seems very, very obsessed with trolling flat Earth people. I think that says a lot about Simon Dan. He doesn't really want to expose real science on his channel. He just wants to troll people who don't agree with his point of view or officialdom. And our audience, thankfully, is far more enlightened spiritually than Simon Dan and his trolls. So don't let that discourage you one bit, my friend. And I want to turn the screen share over to you today, because I think out of all your research, to me, the most compelling stuff, well, I shouldn't say that it's all compelling, but the heartstones. I really think the heartstones are fascinating. I know you just did an update recently, Son of a Titan. So let me turn the screen share over to you, and maybe we should begin, because I think your research is very fascinating, regardless of what Simon Dan and his trolls think.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Let's see. So share screen. Can you see Montgo there in the background?
Yes.
Okay. So let's see where to begin. Well, we can start with this picture here. Since you mentioned the heartstones, last time we talked, I went through a lot about these and talked about the different features that they exhibit, and how those are not easily explained with the traditional approach of erosion and rolling around in river bottoms, and that while people might think that that's what happened with these stones, they don't have fractures, and they have an outer shell that you can really see in this one in the upper left-hand corner, and when it wears away, it is red. And many of them have openings which are blood vessels, and it sounds ridiculous, but these are petrified organs. And I didn't understand how that could be the case, but I was looking at the empirical evidence that I was finding, and it was astonishing. This one rock here has about 15 different anatomical features that are directly spottable if you know the anatomy. This is the first rock that I found that really put me on the subject, and it had the aorta and the vena cava and the coronary artery and the marbling, and a list of about 20 different anatomical features. And when we spoke last, it was at about 15. And since then, I've spotted new things that I didn't initially spot. And one of the ways that I was able to make some of the new connections was because I got wind of this cardiologist.
Can I interrupt while you take a drink of water? Let me just ask, though, for the audience that might already be skeptical. So in nature, we see patterns often. So we'll see patterns in cell structures, in flowers that represent or that are similar to other patterns we see in nature.
Right.
What I want to ask about these heart stones is what would account for the weight of these things? I mean, a rock is a rock, a heart is a heart, fleshy, soft, and it decays quickly. What would account for this petrification and then the subsequent weight?
Well, the weight, I don't, that's a good question. I haven't really thought about what the weight difference would be between a fleshy heart and a petrified heart. But there's definitely going to be a transmutation of elements in order for this to occur. There's either, there are a lot of different theories that are going around as far as rapid petrification or rapid fossilization, and the most predominant one is mud fossil theory, and that involves an exchange of minerals and substances that are in mud surrounding flesh, and then they work their way into the flesh, and the fluids and the gases that are in the flesh work their way out. And that was originally what I thought was happening, but it didn't really make any sense to me because the rocks were, I was finding the organs, not just hearts, all of the organs are there. I was finding them completely separate from the bodies. So it didn't make any sense to me. And a lot of people who see the theory assume that it's just pareidolia, that I'm cherry picking a specific kind of rock that I think looks like a heart. And I've done a number of videos to show that that's not the case. I'm not cherry picking. I've done video. The most recent video I did, I went live into a river bottom, and I just showed in the space of about 10, 15 minutes that I was able to, these are some screenshots from that video. I picked up this rock here and I analyzed it in the video. And then later, as I was editing the video, I was able to see that there were others that are exhibiting the exact same features that I've shown in a number of the videos. This is a good primer video for people if they just want to get an idea of what I'm showing and how to spot these. And you mentioned Son of a Titan, which was a follow-up video. I did a short video that was here in my office live, where I called the foundation for Francisco Torrent Guasp, who's the greatest cardiologist that ever lived, in my opinion. He taught the human race more about the structure and the function of the heart than anybody else. Understanding that the heart is not a 4-chamber pump, but it's actually something that can be unraveled, and it's one long band. It's called the myocardial ventricular band. And so when it fires and the muscle contracts, it goes from one end of the band to the other, but it's rolled up like a big knot. And it took hundreds of years before this man discovered its true shape and design. And it took about 25 years before his peers acknowledged his discovery. And his theory also involved a spiral movement of the blood as it flowed through the heart. So it's very fascinating. I've done a video on it. This is the video talking about his life, talking about the work of Victor Schauberger, also, who is the Austrian scientist who knew more about water and how water functioned and flowed than anyone else. A lot of people refer to him as the Tesla of water. So I show the correlations between the discoveries with the hearts that Francisco Torrent Guasp made, and also with Victor Schauberger. And so the thing that Torrent Guasp was able to eventually prove with advanced imaging, functional MRI, positronic emission, different things where they were actually able to witness the heart expanding and contracting. He was able to prove that the heart is functioning as, he calls it the helical heart, but essentially it functions as a toroid. It's spiraling down and then spiraling out. It's got two different spirals that intertwine in the same way that a toroid does. Can give just kind of a visual here on that. Where is it?
Well, you look for that. Let me ask another question, and forgive me.
Mhm.
I'd imagine
And I still haven't answered your question, but yeah.
well, I'd
Go ahead.
imagine that I asked this in our last interview. I didn't review it, so if I didn't, and I think I must have, the question would be, people would be asking, okay, if you find these heart stones and you can find them among so many other stones, where are the bones of these fallen giants?
Yeah, that was a question that it was a conundrum that I was puzzling over for quite a while, because it didn't make sense to me that you would find just the organ and you wouldn't also find the pieces or remainders of the body. And so I hypothesized that there must be some kind of an extreme force that's taking place that's actually destroying the outer portions of the body. And initially I was thinking that involved something volcanic related. I no longer believe that. But I made a video called Petrified Titans and Organs. Actually, it's a two-part series. If people want just a primer to the work that I've done and the research and see what I've laid out, that's a good place to go, because they're shorter videos and it summarizes all of the findings. And then part two are my theories about the how and why. And ultimately, I believe that it was something that happened very, very quickly, perhaps instantaneously. It involved very high energy, whether it was heat or electrical or plasma or something mythological or biblical. In the Bible, you've got the glittering sword, and in mythology, you've got tales like Medusa, for example, that turn creatures to stone just by looking at them. So I don't believe this happened slowly over time. I think it was a pretty quick thing. Maybe it took hours. I don't know. But if you think of, I call it boiled egg theory, because if you think of the organs, they're all in the chest cavity and the abdominal cavity, and they're anchored in and they're floating in liquid. And then the chest and abdominal cavities themselves are a big fatty sac, and then each of the organs is in its own fatty sac. So if you take, for example, bone and you put it into a crock pot, within a few hours you can take what was a very hard substance and you can cook it down to the point where it becomes gelatin, and that's how they make bone broth. So my theory initially was related to volcanism, because there are things called pyroclastic flows that can occur where you get superheated ejections from volcanoes that can reach temperatures of up to 1,500 degrees, and they can move at near the speed of sound, according to mainstream geology. So that was initially what I was thinking was happening, and I was thinking it had something to do perhaps with, like the bodies at Pompeii that we see. But I discovered later that those are, or not discovered, but someone told me later that those are actually made from plaster, that they were hollowed out and then they filled in the cavities. So, and other people call the whole thing a hoax. But the volcanism was initially the theory, and now I think it has more to do with extreme energy. And going back to your question about weight, there are different theories about rapid petrification. There's a group called Thunderbolts Project, and they have an electric model of the universe. They're not flat earthers. They believe the universe is electric, and that what NASA is showing us and what we're seeing with the telescopes are different electrical plasma phenomenon. And one of them in particular is a man named Mungo Jupp, and he's done a few videos presenting different examples around the world of the rapid petrification of all kinds of different things.
Let me just say
There are,
something.
there are,
You
yeah.
you said something interesting, and people should look into this if they haven't already. As fate would have it, I'm interviewing my friend Crow 777 later today, and
Hmm.
Crow and David Weiss. Oh, I did. So those are plaster filled. Let's talk about that in a second. Crow and David Weiss have, and so many other researchers, have covered what you just said. NASA takes pictures of stars and planets, and they look very, very different. At least I shouldn't say the pictures, they show us representations of planets and stars that look very, very different than what average people see through high-powered telescopes. And I think it speaks to what you're talking about with the Thunderbolt Project and Electric Universe. I think we've been lied to about absolutely everything, and NASA runs cover for officialdom. They run cover
Yeah.
for the official story, the official version of what this thing is, this planet upon which we live, and whatever is above us.
Yeah, and I think people like Simon Dan, whether he's just a flat out paid shill who's there to steer people away from the truth, or whether he's just completely blind to the paradigm that he was brought up in. I don't know. I mean, I coined the phrase paradigm blindness when someone is presented with evidence that suggests that the prevailing explanations are not sufficient for what we're observing empirically in reality, and so they'll come up with all kinds of excuses to explain it away, and then at worst they become cognitively dissonant and can even become angry. So
Well, I got an
you
Occam's
know
razor for you about Simon Dan, and it's this. I don't get to be on YouTube anymore. October 15th, they terminate my channel with 740,000 subs in good standing with no community guideline strikes. But Simon Dan gets to flourish. He gets full support
yeah.
from YouTube. He probably gets full advertising too. So that's how you know who Simon Dan is, whether he's
Well,
stupid
and he
willfully
claims,
or he's just a willful shill. I don't know. Maybe he's a paid
yeah,
shill.
and he claims to be defending the scientific method while absolutely abolishing it. And I have a picture here. I mean, this is an example of, you make observations, which is exactly what I've done with both the mountain and the rocks, and then you
Right.
think of interesting questions. Why are these patterns occurring? Which is exactly what I did. And then I formulated hypotheses. Now, the problem he had was my hypotheses don't gel with mainstream geology, because if what I'm finding and I'm claiming to have found is a fact, then major cornerstones of geology have to be revised.
Yeah,
And
and
I'm
you know
not a
what?
geologist, I'm not an expert, I'm just somebody who's observing, formulating hypotheses, and then I developed testable predictions. I said, if I found one rock that looks this way, I should be able to find more. And I tested my hypothesis, and I went back to the place where I found the first, and started looking around. Within about 10, 15 minutes, I found a dozen, and I filmed that. And the second video that I did on the subject, the first one was called Mud Fossils, the Heart of Matter, and that was looking at that first rock that I showed that had now 20 anatomical features. And then on the second visit to the river bottom, I found another dozen that were very, very similar. And since then, I've learned so much about what I'm finding, and I've started to recognize all kinds of other features and how to spot them. And so the last video, the most recent one on my channel, just shows how easy it is to find what I'm talking about. And it's not easy to explain away with erosion, because there are so many specific anatomical features that are presenting themselves. This is just an evaluation criteria, right, of different things. And obviously, if you find a rock, and the more of of these things on the list you find, the more likely that is to be a petrified heart. And then the question is, how many have to be on the list before you can start to question a prevailing paradigm? Well, Simon Dan would probably say 50,000 or something. I don't know what would be sufficient for him. And when it came to my study of the mountain, that's up to now. This is 28 there, and then another. Blocking it there. Okay. So 56. He picked one item on the list, said it was stupid, and threw the rest out without ever watching any of the other videos. And the first video I did, which is the first video I ever made, so it's not great. It's the one that's gotten the most views because it's the first in the series. there are a lot of things in there that I would change if I was going to do it over again. There's certain pictures I put in that exhibited lots of what do you call sedimentary layering, right?
Well, go back to
So
that picture. People don't know what you're talking about here, Mike. Go back to the picture of the Titan. And if you want to cover this, I think this is probably the most fringy woo-woo area, is that that giant mountain. What do you call that? Mount Goth? What is that?
Mont Go,
Okay, go
it's
back to that picture because your hypothesis may be wrong about all of this, but I find it really interesting because, again, guys, in nature we see the Fibonacci sequence everywhere. And so maybe heart stones resemble hearts because nature,
their
Fibonacci sequence,
hearts.
I don't know, or maybe they're hearts. But you would say, and you actually did a really interesting video where you go into one of these chambers on this mount, and it looks a lot like an ear canal going into where, I mean, it's very interesting stuff. So your hypothesis is that this was once, and the Bible says in those days giants roamed the earth. Maybe this is a Titan. And by the way, you've got so many other very, very interesting pictures in nature of things that resemble giant elephants, giant, Titans, the tree trunks, the giant trees. That's all very interesting. Why don't you cycle through some of those pictures and you can comment on this one real briefly.
Sure. So you mentioned, now we've got a ton of threads going different directions, but so I coined the term biogeology. You got mud fossil theory. There's another channel called Flat Earth Nation, a guy named Alan, who's been there as long as Roger has, and he does great work doing what he calls nephorensics, which is the analysis of biogeology, these different stones that he talks about being reserved in judgment because of the Bible and there are lines in the Bible, the stones will cry out. And so he goes in comparing what he's found to anatomy in books and to histology, which is the study of tissues. And so those guys are doing good work. But if you're not a Christian, if you're not a Bible believer, Alan, for example, he can come off kind of, the hellfire and damnation preacher type of a vibe sometimes. Other times he's really, easygoing and approachable. I've heard David Weiss, for example, on several occasions talk about, flat earth was the dumbest thing he ever came across, and he wouldn't, anytime someone started talking about the Bible or religion, he turned tail and headed the other direction. So there's a whole segment of the population that would be completely turned off by that approach to talking about this subject.
Well, David
and
Weiss,
I didn't.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but David Weiss, by the way, would now say that the flat Earth subject saved his soul. That saved him.
Right, that happens to a lot
God
of people. They
started looking into flat Earth, and now he's a very, very serious Christian.
They end up creationists. I was always a believer in God, but I had this amorphic, nebulous idea of like the force, that permeated all of the totality of all being. But I never really thought of a conscious creator God, and I very much believe in that now. I'm not a Christian, and I may end up there someday. But it's so that's why I coined the phrase biogeology. First of all, I didn't think mud fossil theory was sufficient to explain either one of the things that I was finding, both with the mountain and with the heart stones. The heart stones, because I believe they're petrified. I don't believe it's a fossilization that's happened over a longer period of time. I think it happened quickly. And in the Petrified Titans and Organs Part 2 video, I bring up lots of examples of different ways in which things can petrify that are soft tissue. And there are a lot of theories, about the avatar trees. This is a controversial subject now within the alternative research community, because some people are saying that these are, that this is a tree stump and these are root systems. Other people say that this is the remains of the ancient miners, that they were the giants that you've referred to a few times are if you go back and you look at the Tartarian architecture and all of this hidden history that people are uncovering, in avalanches, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that much of this world was terraformed on a scale that we can't even imagine. So some are saying this is a tree remains, others are saying that this is the remains of mining. Same thing would go for this. tree stump or mining. This is there's a guy named Mike Ferreira on YouTube. Sorry, not on YouTube, on Facebook, and this is his main topic, is looking at all the different ways in which volcanoes and different mining operations and things gel with, that mining is really what's going on. And then you see stuff like this. Roger Spur thinks these are tendon balls, I believe, which are, if you think of a tendon as it inserts into the bone, there's a little ball at the end of it. So he's thinking of titans and gigantic creatures the size, that you can hardly imagine. So others say these are mushrooms. I don't know, but there's a lot of evidence in the stone that looks very much like biology when you start to dig into it. That's why it looks like a big piece of bacon. This looks very much like cellular structure, and then this has been, worn away. Is that exposing blood and flesh under the cells? Who knows? Some say yes, others say no. So these are just examples of different things that, if you think of sedimentary layering, what they tell us about, this could potentially be sedimentary layering, that it's tectonic activity, it's breaking upward, pieces are breaking off, and then it's eroding. But when you see stuff like this, does that really make sense?
That's incredible. Go back. Where is that?
I don't know. In fact, I'd like to give credit to I'm on so many different Facebook groups that are talking about this stuff, and when I see pictures, I grab them for later use, and I don't have anyone that I can credit for these pictures that I'm going to show you today. But whoever they are, thank you. They're amazing. You can see this. To me, this looks a lot more like biology than geology, hence the name biogeology. And when you see some of these stones, they look so much like meat, it is mind-boggling. And there's lots of anomalous examples in geology of things that are very difficult to easily explain away. Like this is a petrified tree that's growing up through layers of strata. Well, what we're told about layers of strata is they take tens of thousands, hundreds, or even millions of years to form. So how does a tree grow up through solid stone? So what exactly happened there, I can't tell you. And then we get into the subject of titans, which up until I started doing this research, I thought was just the stuff of fairy tale and myth. And there were a number of different videos from several different channels that had puzzle pieces that I started putting together. And the mountain here in Javia is known as the elephant because it looks so much like an elephant. This is in Alicante, so this isn't far away. This is about an hour away. And I'm at some point I'm going to get up here and start exploring this stuff as well. It's about twice the size of Montgo. And this is an elephant island, and that's not the best angle for it, but from all of the different angles that you look at, you see that it looks like an elephant. So these are just different examples of things that could be ancient trees. They could be parts of titanic creatures. But to me, when I look at these images, the mainstream explanations fail. That looks very much like a tree and a tree branch. And depending on who you talk to, they'll say it's the remains of mining or trees or whatever. But I'm not attached to anything. I think everyone gets hung up on their pet theories, and then they want to exclude everything else because they believe that what they're talking about is the right thing. And so that leads to these, factions within the community. It's a real divide and conquer strategy also if people are intentionally trying to mislead. And I think a more syncretic approach is the way to do it. It works with mythology and religion, where you look at the overlaps, not if you're a Christian Bible believer, then there's one book, but there are so many different overlaps between the different religions. And if you really want to understand the core teachings in each of them, a syncretic approach is what's going to do it for you. And I think the same should be, done with when we're investigating alternative history, alternative archaeology, geology, you name it. And then the question is, these are gall and bladder stones. You see, they grow like rings of a tree. And the question is, how much of what we see out in nature are the remains of, biological pieces? And I believe most now are that. So that was biogeology. And then when it comes to the mountain, there's an eye right where it should be. There's a ridge line. If you look at the line that comes down, you can see that it's coming down in the same place. Inside the eye socket, there are 20 anatomical correlations. The 5th video I did in the series the second video covers the eye socket and all of the anatomical correlations there. And then the 5th video that I did was about the eyeball. And it's just unbelievable. The 3rd is about the ear, and there are about 10 anatomical correlations in the ear. This is just a fun thing. You mentioned giants. This is the Denia Castle, which is just on the other side of Mont Go from me. And this, as you enter into the castle, there's a painting to the right. And if you look in close, at first I thought it was kids or just errors in perspective. But when you look closer, you can see that these are not children, they're adults, they're doing things, they're dressed as adults. And then you've got people that are 3 times the size. So I've found hearts that I've found multiple feet. I have one here in my office. I can show at the end, it's really heavy, but it's 1.5 feet long. And our hearts are about the size of our fists. So something 1.5 feet would mean something at least 4 times as tall as what we are. And that appears to be what you're seeing here, hiding in plain sight on the wall. This is an old painting about the castle in Denia. And, I think we should keep an open mind when it comes to cosmology. I don't know what we're on. I think when it comes to the whole divide and conquer thing, it's, is it a ball? Is it flat? Maybe that's just the Hegelian dialectic at work, and people start squabbling amongst themselves about, no, it's a ball, no, it's flat. I think it's much more likely to be something like a toroid, because that's exactly how everything seems to function in nature. And I believe the universe is definitely electric. There's so many examples of this. This is the myocardioventricular band that Torrent Wasp discovered. And you still there? I can't.
Yeah, no, it's
Okay.
fascinated. Well, I was just thinking, for those that are completely skeptical about the flat Earth concept and the biblical version of this thing we live on, I'd just say that Crow and David Weiss brought to my attention something that was in the news lately, the Suez Canal, guys. I think it's roughly 120 miles long, and it's flat as a pancake, but it should be hiding. There should be about 6 or 6.5 miles of curvature in that 120 miles of the Suez Canal. They never engineered for a curve, and there is no curve in that distance, which according to officialdom, there should be roughly 6 miles of curve in that 120-mile Suez Canal if NASA's or Copernicus's version of this thing we live on is accurate. That's just the math. It's not my math, it's their math. So Mike, I've like to say, I've coined this, that I'm not a flat earther, but I am a globe, as we're told, skeptic. And Suez Canal and that curvature thing, that's a puzzler. Let's ask Simon Dan to get his arms around that one. He should explain where the curvature is hiding in that 120-mile canal.
I don't want to ask him anything.
I know, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, this is a fulgurite. This is what happens when lightning hits sand. Creates these different structures.
Looks like a lung.
And
looks like lung tissue.
Well, that's the interesting thing about it is these are known as Lichtenberg figures, and the the question is this something that was formed by little rivers that then created a big river? Or was this created by some kind of a high energy event? And obviously the Grand Canyon would be the biggest example of
That's
that.
That's what I was
And
just going to say.
yeah.
The Colorado River did not carve out the Grand Canyon. And you know how I know that, my friend? Because I don't live too far from the Mississippi River. And that
Hmm.
thing never gets any deeper, and it's not leaving any Grand Canyon over hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years. So the Grand Canyon, yeah, that's a real puzzler to me, which brings me back to the Thunderbolts project because they explain how that might happen in an electric universe by modeling and showing some of the things and the features we see over on Mars.
Right. You can see here they're using electrodes and high energy to
Wow.
burn these Lichtenberg figures into wood. So imagine that on a scale that was a million or 10 million times greater. Maybe that could form something like the Grand Canyon
Yeah.
or these Lichtenberg figures that I showed a moment ago. It's just incredibly fascinating. Um, the Yeah, there's so many things to cover
Wow.
here. Let me
Yeah,
get back on
that's
track.
really cool.
Isn't that amazing?
Hmm.
So let's see. The This is an example of what they tell us about what's happening in the upper atmospheres. You got elves and sprites, and there are a lot of theories about what's happening above this line right here, because this appears to be a mirroring like a Fata Morgana mirage or something. There's a lot that's unusual about the upper atmosphere. I think we're in an electric universe, and maybe what the ancients, when they were talking about Medusa, were trying to express was some major cataclysmic event, and they saw the skies open up and things hit the ground, and this is how they remembered it. Cthulhu is another example of this destructive god, and it's always tendrils. And you've got Medusa with the snakes and Cthulhu with the tentacles. And there's an interesting channel, J Dreamers. He does a lot of stuff on the plasma apocalypse and the the theories that surround that. And then there's a lot of debate about, were these carved, or was this some kind of a high energy event that melted buildings and then they just reclaimed what they could. I haven't seen these sites with my own eyes, so I can't draw conclusions. But I think ultimately there's a fractal nature to our world and to our reality that ties into magnetics. It ties into fluid dynamics and the flow of toroids of whether it's storm systems, whether it's the flow of blood through our heart. These things are scalable, they're reproducible, they can be reproduced in a laboratory, which is amazing. You don't have to rely on the high priests of scientism with their giant telescopes or supposed things floating in space to tell you the truth about the nature of reality. You can actually engage in experiments yourself. And there's a guy named David Schleiermacher who's doing amazing stuff. I hope I pronounce his name right. This is a wonderful channel. He uses bubbles and LED lighting and sound dynamics to show all the different ways in which to show you one of his videos here, all the different ways in which sound affects matter. And with the lighting, he's able to show all kinds of different patterns that emerge just through the use of sound, and that ties back into the biblical story scientifically, in my opinion, because there's something called sonoluminescence. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's also known as star in a jar. Have you heard of that?
No, but just on a side note, I'm really fascinated by harmonics and resonance. You've seen the experiments where they put sand or salt on a plate and the
Yes.
varying hertz
Yeah. So
sound
this
frequencies
is the
create
exact same thing.
beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful, beautiful, beautiful geometric designs. By the way, there's another name. I think there's somebody else who tapped into what we're talking about here. Guys, you want to talk about hidden history? The powers that be know this. Rockefeller, Rothschild, they know all of this. The guy's name is Tesla. All right. Nikola Tesla, free energy guys, they know it. They stole all his work. They locked it away in a
Yeah.
closet, and got to leave it to people like this David Shiremeyer and Mike Wilkerson to help us figure it out. But yeah, the powers that be know it. It's all hidden history.
Yeah, this is absolutely amazing. Amazing. How much time do we have left? I just want to gauge
We
myself
can
here.
go about another 20 minutes.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah, I can't recommend his channel enough. It's just amazing to look at. He's done so many different kinds of experiments. And so when you were talking about the cymatics, which is this plate with the dust, what you're really looking at is a cross-section of a three-dimensional emanation. So the sound is creating an emanation that has geometrical structure to it. And we don't perceive it because we're not seeing it. But he's visualizing it. The Aurea apophysis showed that magnets have a toroidal field all around them, and there are all kinds of different ways that you can visualize this field. And one of the most interesting experiments of all is sonoluminescence, and I had an example of that somewhere. Let me see if I can find it. This is how a toroid works. So you've got a spiraling in on one end and a spiraling out on the other. And this is the primary shape of life. This is how everything grows. This is how sound and water function and move. And the more we understand about this and how it ties into magnetics and electrical stuff, the more we understand about the nature of reality. And for me, it was practically a spiritual experience learning about the function and the structure of the heart, because this is exactly how our hearts function. So I believe at the center of the heart is a singularity that is perpetual motion machine that functions from our first breath to our last. And we're not even breath while we're in the womb as well. Yeah. And it's all based on these principles here. And everything grows in this fashion. The way in which the leaves of trees and branches, form is following the same kinds of mathematical sequences. These are incredible. I didn't know about these until a couple months ago. These are called diatoms. These are single cell organisms that are just unbelievable. Each and every one completely unique. Wow. And when we look at fluid dynamics, we're seeing all the same things at work. In fact, the structure of matter and elements also is breaking down based on these same principles when you dig into the more esoteric schools.
See, esoteric
that are teaching about.
That's the right word, and it's hidden. And wouldn't it be interesting if the schools actually taught science like this? How much more engaged and enlightened would young people be if they taught this in schools? If you really dug into the real science, well, you know why they don't do that, Mike? Because
same with geology.
It takes you back to the proof of a creator every single time. That's why they don't teach this.
The most boring thing I could think of when I was younger was like studying rocks. Why would anyone want to be an archaeologist? Dig up a bunch of old stuff that's buried under the ground, and how boring. Okay, fine if you find a treasure or something, but spend all your days out there in the heat and work in the land, no thank you. But if I had understood that maybe biogeology was the thing, and that a lot of the stones that we were seeing were actually petrified organs, I would have had a totally different relationship to nature. I would have been looking with entirely different eyes instead of just walking around blinded to the possibilities. And many people have reached out to me on my channel and thanked me and told me that my research has really changed the way that they see the world around them. And it's some very moving letters. David Weiss, on the other hand, I have to apologize to, because he's been a big supporter of the channel, but after I came out with my last video, he said, "You're the reason I can't be out in nature anymore without being absolutely terrified."
Well, that's funny. Well, you know what's funny about this?
Sorry, Dave, I didn't mean to frighten you, but it is a little creepy when you get into the whole topic of resets. How many have there been? Is it just like, if from a biblical perspective, we've got the flood of Noah, and whatever came after, I don't know, but then you've got all the mud flood people talking about the different layers, and there seem to be at least two recognizable resets when you're looking at the architecture that's still around the cities today, or you're looking at the ancient stuff like Angkor Wat and in modern, I guess it's Libya, Baalbek, and these kinds of places, Göbekli Tepe. Sorry, I interrupted. You were about to say something.
Oh, it's not a big deal. I was just going to say that, I think you must have reached out to me or sent me an email at some point, and then I said, hey, yeah, I don't even think you asked if you could come on and do an interview. You may have sent me information. I said, well, let's talk about it. And I think some of the most interesting conversations I've ever had are those that I know are fringy and difficult, and some people will immediately tune out, but others listen with an open heart and mind. And I think it kind of ties into this big picture that we're seeing right now in society. Some people are blind to the dangers of the experimental biological agent, and they'll take it without thinking. They'll take it without looking into it. They'll take it despite warnings from friends and family. And I think the same is true here, right? I mean, some people have the eyes to see and the heart with which to listen, and some don't. That's an interesting thing about human nature. I mean, that's why I had David Weiss and Crow on to talk about flat Earth. I know that's a dangerous topic to many people. You could lose subscribers. I don't care. I just want to have interesting conversations about the stuff that you can't talk about in school, and increasingly, they don't teach it in school, by the way, but increasingly you can't talk about it on YouTube or you'll lose your channel.
I know. What happened to you? Sarah Westall, she interviewed me, and her channel was also taken down. It's just, what happened to the First Amendment? The things that I was most proud about as a child growing up about being an American are being systematically dismantled by the people who are in power right now, and most people are completely oblivious to it. And the people who are awake to it and are calling out and trying to get people to pay attention. There's a term that's been weaponized, and it's called conspiracy theorist, and I've rebranded it now. I'm calling them paying attentionists, because they're the ones who are actually paying attention. If you think about this last year with regards to health, you've got to be completely paradigm blind and just getting all of your information from incredibly biased sources to even buy into this. But the number of people who are is just, it's beyond my ability to.
Well, me too. But let me say one more thing. I think what's really interesting about it is that if you are one of those people, and by the way, you can't lump all these people into one group, because, for instance, my neighbor who took the jab, despite my warnings, he was a very big Trump supporter. He's a conservative and almost across the board. But the point I was going to make, and I don't know that he's not a Christian, but I just think that if you imagine some of these people that believe in the Big Bang theory of the world, they listen and believe everything, they listen to and believe everything CNN tells them, they believe in big pharma and a cure for COVID in the form of they don't believe in their own immune systems, they don't believe in the beauty of creation, they don't believe in a God. What an empty existence to live on the planet and just digest CNN and run out and get the jab. I mean, those people are lost. I don't know how else to put it. They're lost.
I'm going to tie what you just said into my profession. I'm a chiropractor, and I adjust people for a living. And the old school chiropractic was very philosophical, esoteric, and at its core, it was a vitalistic philosophy. And the profession is now very fragmented, divide and conquer once again, where you have mechanistic, nihilistic, atheistic people who they just want to be physiotherapists who manipulate the spine, and they want to throw all the woo out and ignore all that old stuff because those people were snake oil salesmen that we can't trust, and they didn't know what they were talking about because it was so long ago. Profession's like 125 or 130 years old. But something very interesting about that is at the core of chiropractic philosophy is the concept of innate intelligence, which is the intelligence that courses through our nervous system and through every cell of our body from the moment we're conceived to the moment we die. And when we die, that intelligence exits the body because all the cells are still there. Everything that runs our whole body is still there. The blood is there, the bones, the muscles. but it's all breaking down, right? It's not, it's not there anymore. And that's the innate intelligence. And that same innate intelligence is what heals us. it's what, you know, when you cut yourself, there isn't a doctor on the plane or the planet or whatever you want to call it that can make that cut heal faster. All you can do is create the right circumstances for healing. And this gets into germ theory versus terrain theory. Has that argument really been won by the germ theory side? Well, it's been won in the sense that they've completely squelched all opinions otherwise and claimed that it's fact. But when you dig into it, you find out that there's a whole lot of weight to terrain theory. And it's, you know, it's the difference between the microbe is going to kill you and you have power and control over what happens to you and your health based on how you live, based on whether you're consuming water, getting sunlight, exercising on a regular basis. You know, these are all fundamental things that we should all be taught about. Oh, certain vitamins are often lacking in people with you know, deficient diets. Maybe that might be a good thing. So throughout this whole thing, it's just been fear porn, talking about the cases, talking about how many people have died. And, you know, while we were locked down here, the tobacco stores were open, and tobacco kills 6 million a year. And I don't know what the official number for CV is now, but, you know, at no point were they keeping you from being able to buy Coca-Cola or keeping you from buying cigarettes or alcohol. They were locking us in our homes, and you had access to all the stuff that will kill you slowly, no problem at all. And that's just, it's ridiculous. So terrain theory says that, you know, if you've got, there's a meme out there of a fish in a fishbowl, and one fishbowl is really, really dirty and the fish is sick. And we're like, okay, what are we going to do now? We can inject the fish, or we can give it some pills to try and get it healthy, right? Or we can clean the bowl. Wow, what a concept, right?
Right.
And there's no talk in the mainstream narrative of cleaning the bowl. And it's like, that is pure insanity. Whether you believe in germ theory or microbe theory, it's probably a combination of both, right? Because there are pathogens out there that will kill you. There are bacteria that will, you know, do you in. But how much of it is in our own hands, and how much of it is just that mystery thing that's supposedly floating around that's killing everybody. So I just wanted to oh, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here. I wanted to come back to you because we haven't seen you here. We're just seeing that animation over and over again. So
Okay.
I wanted to connect the speaker with the voice, but then you can take us back to the screen share. We got about 10 minutes left.
Yeah, so that bulb, that bubble that's expanding and collapsing, that is called sonoluminescence. And there are experiments that you can find on, sono means sound, luminescence means light. And this ties into the Bible also, because first there was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, or the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? And the Spirit of God moved upon the waters. And so that God spoke existence into creation, right? That's the biblical narrative. Well, guess what? It's the scientific narrative also, because sound precedes light. Very interesting, right? So they've done experiments where they have a spherical bowl or ball filled with liquid, and they hit it with sound frequencies, just like the cymatics that I was showing earlier and that you were talking about, right? Those sound frequencies cause gases that are in the liquid to coalesce into bubbles. Those bubbles then expand and then collapse inward upon themselves. And at the moment that they collapse inward, they give off light, which is really interesting, because when they hit it with the right frequencies, this is happening thousands of times a second, and they create what's called a star in a jar. And the amazing thing about it is it looks exactly like stars do, not from what NASA gives us and shows us with their telescopes, but if you look with a P900 or P1000 at the stars, they look like cymatic emanations with multiple rings and geometrical forms that are vibrating, because they look like they're underwater. So it's interesting because sound precedes light. So this ties in a bit to, I think, the Bible as well, because it talks about, you know, God, the Spirit of God moved upon the waters, and first there was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. So this is very fascinating, and it ties into chiropractic as well, because when we do a chiropractic adjustment and that pop happens in the joint, it's a stretching that's happening of the joint, and that's causing this coalescing of the gas, and then it implodes and gives off light. So it's so very fascinating.
Well, we should probably stop talking about this, Mike, because we might actually get some people to start to believe, atheists might start to believe that, you know what, maybe this thing isn't just the result of a random Big Bang, all the beauty and design in this universe. Maybe there is actually a creator. Uh-oh, we're going to wake some people up, Mike. Careful.
Yeah, it's strange when science kind of loops back around. It's like the snake eating its own tail, and starts to prove things that we're taught are not necessarily, reality, at least by the mainstream model.
I've given you screen share ability again here, and I can't believe we've already gone about an hour. So if you want to just show us a few more things, we should probably start to put a bow on this one.
Yeah, let's see. Synchronicities, there's been so many related to this. This is a picture that a friend posted, and people who've seen my videos understand that this is exactly what I've been describing in the rocks, but this person knew nothing about my research. Here's another big one that was in a store. I filmed it, and it's at the end of one of my videos.
Mike, we don't see it. You'll have to do the screen share.
Oh, sorry. It's the same shape, the harp shape, and this is a bigger version that was found inside of a grocery store, sitting by itself on AstroTurf, of all things. I filmed it, and it's at the end of one of my recent videos. Yeah, so we were talking before about reproducibility and the scientific method, and I think it's important that we remain skeptical. There are a lot of people who are straw-manning people. They're using logical fallacies to throw out arguments, and I learned a term about a week or two ago that is wonderful. It's called steel manning, and I hadn't heard it. I never studied debate. I guess that's one of the things you learn in debate, but it's the idea that you go into another person's argument in such depth that you know it as well as they do, so you can present their strongest argument and then defeat that. And that doesn't seem to be happening much when it comes to my research or a lot of the other alternative researchers that are out there. Yeah, so I think when it comes to subjects that shape our worldviews, we should approach the investigation as if our lives or souls depended on spotting the lies and the inconsistencies.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's so much to cover. I didn't really talk much about the new research that I'm doing. I've got a new video coming out hopefully in the next few days that will be showing some of the things that I've found in the last year with a mountain that I haven't reported on yet. One of the criticisms that was raised had to do with sedimentary layers on the mountain, which many people believe debunk all of my findings. And it was one that I puzzled with for a while. I'm just looking for a picture here. Yeah, so when we see the sedimentary layers, this is how they tell us that we know how old things are. They can look at what's in the layer. And so it doesn't make sense that something would petrify in layers. And so initially when I was looking at that, I thought this could be a deal killer for the whole subject. And this is what Montgo looks like from the side. And the more I pondered it, the more I started to think about how the skull bones are structured. So this is trabecular bone, which I've talked about in the videos. Basically, what I was going to show is that the skull bones grow outward in rings. So if you look at them from the top, it looks like circles. And if you look at it from the side, it looks like straight lines. So it doesn't prove one way or the other. It doesn't prove that it's a titan, but it also doesn't prove that it's not.
Why don't we direct people to your website? It's actually the YouTube channel is primarily where people would find the work, and that's Stellium 7 on YouTube, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have a YouTube. I don't have a website,
Okay.
so
So
that's where they find me.
so Stellium, guys,
And
Stellium 7, the number 7, and that's Mike Wilkerson. What are you working on? When's the next video coming, Mike?
next video is coming the next few days. I've got a number of things that I'll be showing. The synostosis, which I was trying to find here, and I couldn't find the image. There's some interesting things that I found there's terracing all over this region. All of the mountains from the very foothills up to where it's so steep that you can't walk anymore are covered with terraces that are made of chunks of broken limestone. And when you see the limestone unbroken, this is what it looks like. There we go. Here's a big chunk of what it looks like when it's unbroken. And you can see that it's got a very biological look to it. And there's all kinds of openings and what I call blood vessels that oftentimes have reddish earth oozing out of them. We talked a lot about that in the last interview. But the interesting thing about this is if you compare it to elephant skin, it looks identical. There's a channel named Ian, it's called Ian David Harris, and he's done some interesting work. After seeing my videos, he noticed that a lot of the rocks that he was seeing in Thailand were identical to what I was showing, but on a much bigger scale. So this ties into the fractal nature of reality, and he's got some incredible footage. Just a couple of screenshots here. He's comparing these rocky structures to the skin of elephants. So his theory is that all of Thailand is part of a gigantic elephant. You can see there, this is just like the squamous blood cells. So you can see here, this is when one of those bumps is cut off, it reveals red inside. These cover a vast region. And when you look at the dermis, the skin layers, you've got squamous, and then they get thicker and thicker as they go down. It's finding the same thing in the stones there.
That is bizarre. It does look like scales.
So anyone who's studied the whole mud fossil thing is familiar with Roger's 900-mile-long dragon in the Sahara Desert, and so that's consistent with my thought that there have been different eras and that things were really, really big, like maybe even continent sized, and then a fractal level down, which would be Mont Go size, and then there's our level. We had giants before that, and it's fascinating stuff when you start to get into it. And the latest video is going to be covering the terraces and the idea that before the terraces were built and all the stone was unbroken, the mountains here would have had a very, very different look, and I'll be showing that. It's easier to see once it's well organized. So, yeah.
Well, I know some of this sounds insane to people, but it is an interesting conversation to have, and it's an interesting area of research. And if we just come full circle and talk about the heart stones, or at least just show some final pictures of the heart stones. Do you have any pictures handy of these heart stones that when you split them open, they're red inside? And the other thing I wanted to ask you is,
Sure.
were you ever able to do any sort of X-ray or what do you call it when you
Yeah, so I was going to take them for CAT scans. Here's
CAT scans? Yeah.
full screen right now. So this is an example of one. I've got one video called Broken Hearts Tell Tales where I go into the field and I broke them open. And this is just a smaller version. And so you can see that it's actually broken here. And when you open it up, you've got the iron ore inside in the channels. And I've shown that with a whole bunch of stones. Sometimes when you break them open, you can see the chambers. There's one of the bigger rocks that I show towards the end of that broken hearts tell tales has the remains of not just the chambers, but the papillary muscles, which contract to open the valves. Here's an example of one. The top was broken off. You can see the sulcus lines on the back, and then that's got all the reddish iron ore inside. Sometimes they've got blood vessels. Is that in focus?
Yeah.
You can see the remains of blood vessels. You can see at the top the openings for the blood vessels, the sulcus lines, and then it'll have this curved underside. And when the heart goes into contraction, it has a spiral to the contraction. So the bottom end of the heart will spiral, and you can see that. So it's really hard to explain that with rolling around and erosion in a river bottom. A lot of synchronicities as I've done this research. This is pretty cool. Last night when I was walking, I was thinking about you and how cool it was that we were going to talk again. And right when I thought your name, I looked down and I saw that one right on the ground in front of me, sitting by itself. And then there was another synchronicity the other day. My friend Alex, conspiracy music guru. I'm not going to go into a long story, but we ended up meeting some people who were also researchers and very interested in asking the unaskables, the unquestionables. And so as we left their home, this was sitting on the dirt road all by itself. And so there's all kinds of different moments where I've had thoughts, and then I'll find one of these. And I have literally hundreds of them. I'll just show real quick if I can find it without any delay. So, Son of Titan, share screen. So the cardiologists start. Oh, this is what I was talking about before. You can see there's the blood vessel openings at the top. And break it open, and it's looking very fleshy inside.
Yeah, that's wild.
And so the son of this cardiologist came to my office, and I showed him all the hearts, and he was here for about 90 minutes, and I prefaced it with a lot of information before we walked into the room, and he could see all of these stones laid out by category, and it was a very interesting dialogue we had, and I made a video about it. There you can see in the corner right there, that's the one that's 1.5 feet long. So these are all upside down, and these are the big ones that have so the blood vessel openings. Here's the marbling of the fat. This is the coronary sulcus, coronary artery. On the backside is the aorta. Same exact thing here and here. This one is broken off, and you can see it's exposed and revealing the ventricle. This one, if it's got a crack in it, if you open it up, you can see that what's known as the trabecula carne, which is the inner portion of it's like a bumpy portion of the heart muscle, and it's not smooth inside the chambers like you would think. It's a totally different shape. So he got to see those, and that the video that you said you saw recently, Son of a Titan, was all about that exchange.
And what was his reaction?
Initially, he was just trying to understand what I was talking about. When he understood it, he thought it was kind of curious. And then at one point, I said something. I was talking about contraction, and his father, when he's done the dissections of the hearts, they were always soft, and so he had a problem with me talking about the heart going into contraction upon death. But that's called rigor mortis, and that only lasts about 12 hours, and it starts to taper off. So we had a little. We're also speaking Spanish, and it's not my first language. So, but by the end of the 90 minutes, especially when I showed him the biggest one towards the end, he really had to admit that it was an astonishing number of correlations. This is what I was talking. Oh wait, jumping past it. So, Son of a Titan. There, that's what I wanted to show you. That's how you can see the twisting on contraction.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see this in many of the hearts. And these lines here, these are the sulcus lines where the folds of the heart meet, and you can see them in many of the rocks. So once you learn how to spot them, you know the basic anatomy, which is what I teach in several videos. They're easy to spot, and once you realize that there's an up and a front, usually blood vessels on the side, you have very specific shapes that are hard to explain with just erosion. So the CAT scans I wasn't able to do because initially we had months of lockdown, and then I contacted a number of labs, and they wouldn't let me do any tests on non-human specimens. So the next thing I'm going to do is contact some veterinarians and hope that, because some vets have CAT scans, but so that this is a kidney, kidney shaped. There's the blood vessel openings, and then you can see the lines there. Those are known as the medulla, which if you look up the makeup of a kidney, you can see that it breaks off in exactly that pattern. So there's a reproducibility. It's easy to find, and we're paradigm blind. We're taught not to see these things, and they're all around us. And many people have sent me rocks from around the world and expressed appreciation for the videos. So.
Well,
yeah. So
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I'm right now I'm looking into biological transmutation and electric transmutation. I started talking about Mungo Jup earlier in the Thunderbolts project, and I think that's likely what happened. There's some kind of a major electrical or plasma event that's led to these happening. You were about to say something.
Well, I would say if this thing makes it to iTunes, guys, if you're listening via podcast, obviously this is one you're going to want to watch on BitChute. I always post my videos at the top of sgtreport.com as well. And I'd say this as we wrap it up, guys. You know that they've lied to you about what is above us. Now, whether your worldview is a heliocentric one or not, just look at those telescope images of stars and compare and contrast the images coming from NASA of the planets versus what people are capturing via telescopes. It's very clear that they've lied to us about what is above us. Mike's work makes us wonder what they're not telling us about what is below our feet as well. His channel on YouTube is Stellium 7. Mike, I know this is challenging content for a lot of people. It is, like I said at the very beginning, it's woo. Are you ready for some woo? So those of you that have stuck with us, thanks for taking the journey into woo-woo with us. This time, what are they hiding from us? Hidden history, the stuff you won't hear anywhere else, you can find on Stellium 7. Mike, thank you so much for your time. I really do appreciate it.
My pleasure, Sean. Thank you for inviting me back.
Well, it's my absolute pleasure. Stellium 7 guys, YouTube, go over there and subscribe. Mike Wilkerson has been our guest. And friends, thank you so much for tuning in. Wherever you found us, we appreciate you very much. A special thank you to our subscribed stars and to our members at SGTReport.tv. Thank you for helping to make this content and all content possible. And for real news, friends, you can visit us every single day at SGTReport.com, the antidote to corporate propaganda 24/7. God bless you and your family. Bye-bye.
One of your listeners out there is going to have had it up to his eyeballs, and that may be the straw that breaks the camel's back. This has to stop. If we drop the ball, our children, our grandchildren are basically going to be slaves. It's that simple.